The desert night was so quiet it almost mocked us. We had been told again and again that no air cover was coming, that the sky was empty, that all the drones, fighters, and birds we once trusted had been pulled back or knocked out. For weeks, we had fought like ghosts on the ground, slipping through villages and rocky hills, avoiding searchlights, pushing ourselves deeper into enemy territory where the rules of survival were written in whispers and gunpowder. The team was down to 7 men, each face hollowed out by exhaustion, each set of eyes reflecting the same hard truth: we were on our own. The last time Command tried to send us a resupply bird, it vanished from radar before crossing the border, a streak of fire in the sky confirming that the enemy controlled everything above us. From that moment, the word was final. Air power was gone. The age of American dominance in the air was dead, and we, a handful of SEALs on the ground, were living proof of what it meant to fight without the gods overhead. We carried what little ammo we had, rationed every bullet like it was the last coin in a gambler's hand, and leaned on training drilled into us since Coronado. But even training had limits when the desert seemed endless and the enemy numbers swelled like waves. We were 3 clicks out from the ruins of an old oil refinery, our designated extraction point, or what passed for it, when the first sound of engines rolled across the sand. Not aircraft. Trucks. Convoy-sized. The kind of convoy that didn't come to negotiate. We had thermal images on our scopes, and the heat blooms told us everything. Dozens of fighters, mounted guns, technicals. We had been tracked, maybe betrayed, maybe just unlucky, but it didn't matter anymore. They were coming for us, and the sand offered no place to hide. "They'll pin us here," Ramirez muttered, crouched low with his suppressed 416 Hong Kong dollars, eyes narrowed behind sandy goggles. He wasn't wrong. The ridgeline gave them high ground, and the refinery below us was nothing but rusted pipes and skeletal towers, covered too thin to matter. We were cut off, no exfil bird, no drones overhead, no command voice in our ears. Just static. Just silence. "We dig in," I said, though my throat was dry, the words heavy. "Make them pay for every step." That was the plan, if you could even call it one. A plan soaked in desperation. We moved fast, sliding into the refinery's shadow, setting fields of fire, checking mags, chambering rounds with the kind of calm that only comes when you know death is close enough to taste. The trucks closed in, headlights off, only the faint orange glow of cigarettes giving them away. They were confident, too confident, like hunters who already believed the prey was trapped. I counted at least 40 of them, maybe 50, all armed to the teeth, laughing in Arabic, shouting about prizes, about American heads. The kind of talk that fueled them, the kind of talk we had heard before, but this time there was no comfort in thinking we could call a bird to erase them. This time it was just us, rifles, and the thin hope that maybe we'd buy enough time to die standing. The first shots cracked, and our rifles spat fire into the dark. Ramirez dropped 2 with clean double taps, Sanchez lit up a technicals driver before it could bring the mounted gun around, and I stitched a line of rounds across the hood of another truck. For a moment, the night screamed with chaos, shouts and return fire tearing the stillness apart. But their numbers swallowed ours, and soon the bullets came back at us like a storm. Sparks flew from rusted beams, rounds hissed past ears, the air itself seemed to shred. Sanchez went down with a curse, his plate carrier catching the round but knocking him flat. Ramirez dragged him back while I laid suppressive fire, but even then I could feel it, this wasn't a fight we could win. The enemy tightened the noose, flooding in from both flanks, pushing us deeper into the maze of steel bones and shadows. Grenades clattered, explosions hammered our ears, dust and smoke filled our lungs. We were fighting like cornered wolves, every trigger pull a defiance, but wolves can be hunted down. Then it happened. At first, I thought it was more trucks, another wave rolling in, until the sound changed. A low growl, deeper, heavier, one that didn't belong to the desert floor. It rolled over us like thunder, vibrating through the pipes and towers. My head snapped up, heart punching my chest. It couldn't be. It wasn't possible. Not here, not now. But then I saw it, the faint silhouette cutting across the starlit sky, slow, deliberate, unmistakable. A beast with wings wide as nightmares, a shape every SEAL knew, every operator prayed for in moments like this. The AC-130. Spectre. Ghost Rider. Angel of Death. Call it whatever you want, but when that gunship prowls the sky, the battlefield changes. "No way," Ramirez whispered, voice almost breaking. "They said air power was gone." But there it was, circling, banking with lazy menace, like a predator stretching before the kill. For a heartbeat, even the enemy froze, heads tilted back, confusion in their voices. They weren't used to being the ones hunted from above. The growl deepened, the circle tightened, and then the night was split wide open. The first burst came from the 25mm, a line of traces ripping red arcs through the dark, stitching across the convoy with surgical hate. Trucks exploded, men scattered, screams rose as metal and fire filled the desert. Then the 40mm barked, lobbing grenades that turned clusters of fighters into red mist, each detonation lighting the sand like a hellish sunrise. And when the 105mm finally spoke, the ground itself shook, a thunderclap so violent it felt like the earth had split. A shell landed dead center in the convoy, and where men had stood seconds before, there was nothing but smoke, fire, and silence. We stared in awe, rifles forgotten for a moment, as the sky turned into a canvas of fire. The gunship painted its masterpiece with unrelenting fury, every pass a reminder that when America's angel of death chooses to fly, there is no hiding, no running, no mercy. The enemy tried to scatter, tried to flee into the dunes, but the AC-130 hunted them, each fleeing shadow marked, tracked, and erased. The laughter, the shouting, the confidence, they were gone, replaced by panic, by shrieks, by chaos. For the first time in weeks, the battlefield didn't belong to them. It belonged to us again. And as the refinery glowed in the firelight, as the smell of burning fuel and flesh rolled across the sand, I felt it in my chest, air power wasn't gone. It had just been waiting, and tonight it had returned with a vengeance that painted the sky red. The silence after the barrage was almost unnatural, broken only by the crackle of fire and the distant whine of metal collapsing into itself. For a moment, none of us moved, half afraid that if we breathed too loudly the vision in the sky would vanish and we'd be left with the same hopelessness we had carried for weeks. The AC-130 circled above like a guardian spirit, its engines humming low and steady, and though I couldn't see the crew, I knew they were up there, eyes glued to sensors, fingers hovering over triggers, watching us from the heavens with the kind of cold precision that only came from years of flying death into combat zones. Ramirez finally spoke, his voice rough with disbelief. They lied to us, man. They said no more birds. They said we were on our own. I glanced at him, then at the burning convoy below, bodies sprawled across the sand like broken dolls. Then I guess someone forgot to tell them, I said, my throat still dry. But the reprieve was short-lived. Through the smoke, more headlights flickered on the horizon. The enemy wasn't done, they had reserves, more vehicles pushing in from the east, and if they reached us before the gunship could cycle back, we'd still be trapped. I raised my comms, praying to hear something other than static. At first, there was nothing, then a burst of clarity, the calm, controlled voice of the gunship's fire control officer. Spectre to ground team, copy your situation. Stay low, stay marked. We have you. For the first time in weeks, those words, we have you, hit like medicine. We weren't ghosts anymore. We weren't abandoned. We were back in the fight, and someone up there was willing to burn the sky red for us. Copy, Spectre, I said, almost shouting over the fires. Targets east, multiple technicals inbound, range about 4 clicks. We see them, the voice replied. Clearing hot. And just like that, the beast roared again. Traces laced the night, tearing across the horizon, and the newcomers never had a chance. Explosions lit the dunes, shockwaves rolling back toward us, heat washing over our faces. Men screamed, engines howled, and then silence reclaimed it all. The desert was a graveyard, glowing with the fires of their arrogance. But even as relief surged through us, I couldn't shake the tension. If the gunship was here, it meant command had risked everything to send it, which also meant we weren't just a stranded SEAL team anymore, we were part of something bigger, something critical. I didn't know what game was being played, but I knew this, if the enemy had enough control to shut the skies for weeks, then whatever kept this bird flying tonight was fragile, and we couldn't depend on it lasting forever. We can't just sit here, Sanchez groaned, clutching his side where the plate had stopped around. He was bleeding from shrapnel that had found the gap under his arm. Ramirez tore open a med kit, pressing gauze hard against the wound. Sanchez winced but kept talking. If we stay, they'll keep coming. They'll throw everything until they bring us down, even with the bird. He was right. This wasn't over. The gunship was powerful, but it wasn't invincible. Anti-air could be hidden in the hills, waiting. The enemy wasn't stupid, they'd already proven they could knock birds out of the sky. I had to think fast. Our mission, the one buried under weeks of silence and blood, was to gather intel on the refinery and the weapons caches buried in its shadow. Now, with the fires lighting every corner, we had a chance to finish that mission before more waves came. I pulled the team together, voices low under the drone of engines. We move inside, grab whatever we can, and signal Spectre for exfil. If they got this bird here, maybe they can get us a way out. But we don't waste this chance. They nodded, weary but alive, and we moved into the skeleton of the refinery, boots crunching over broken glass and scorched steel. Inside, the air was thick with the stench of oil and smoke. Shadows stretched long across rusted machinery, pipes dripping black sludge. Every corner felt like it held ghosts of workers who had long since fled or been executed. We searched fast, spreading out, flashlights cutting through the dark. Ramirez found crates marked in Cyrillic, weapons stashed by the dozens, RPGs, anti-air missiles, proof of how the enemy had gained control of the skies. Sanchez, despite his wound, snapped photos with a small encrypted camera, his hand steady even as his blood soaked the floor. I found documents pinned to a wall inside a makeshift command room, maps with routes circled, supply lines marked, targets identified. My stomach twisted as I realized what I was seeing. They weren't just holding this territory, they were planning to expand, to strike deeper, and the targets weren't just military. Civilian cities, aid convoys, ports, places that couldn't defend themselves. This wasn't random insurgency. This was coordinated war. I stuffed the maps into my pack, every sense screaming to move faster. Outside, the roar of the gunship thundered again, each detonation shaking the walls. The enemy was regrouping, sending more men to their deaths, and Spectre was tearing them apart. But time was short. I keyed the radio. Spectre, this is ground team. Intel secured. We need exfil before they bring something bigger. The reply came, steady as stone. Copy, ground. Exfil bird is en route, but you'll need to move to LZ Charlie, grid coordinates 227 by 441. 10 clicks southeast. Can you move? 10 clicks in open desert, with wounded, with ammo running dry. It was suicide. But it was also the only way out. We'll move, I said, though my gut clenched. Mark LZ with IR when in sight. We'll cover you, the officer replied. That was all we had. I turned back to the team, their faces lit by firelight and exhaustion. We run southeast. Spectre covers. No stopping unless someone can't walk. You go down, we drag you, no arguments. Clear? They nodded, even Sanchez, biting down against the pain. We moved out, slipping back into the night, leaving the burning refinery behind. The desert stretched wide, a black sea of sand and rock, the stars cold above us. Behind, the gunship circled, its cannon thunder shaking the world, its traces streaking red lines across the sky like divine brushstrokes. Every burst was both shield and reminder, this was temporary. This angel of death couldn't guard us forever. We ran hard, hearts pounding, lungs burning, each step taking us closer to freedom, or to another fight. The enemy wasn't done, and neither were we. The desert was alive with fire behind us, but ahead it was nothing but black emptiness stretching forever, broken only by jagged ridgelines that loomed like teeth. Every step dug into sand that swallowed our boots, every breath pulled hot dust into our lungs, and every muscle screamed with the weight of exhaustion. We were 7 men running on fumes, one bleeding badly, all carrying packs heavy with rifles, ammo, and now the intel that had cost us blood to collect. The AC-130's engines rumbled above, steady and constant, and every time its cannon spoke, the ground trembled like thunder rolling across the dunes. Each burst bought us seconds, tearing apart the waves of fighters trying to chase us down, but I knew the math. Eventually they'd wise up, stop sending meat into the grinder, and call in something more dangerous, maybe even drag out their anti-air if they had it staged nearby. That thought was the stone in my gut as we pushed forward, compass guiding us toward the coordinates Spectre had given. 10 clicks. It might as well have been 100. Sanchez stumbled, cursing through clenched teeth, blood still seeping from the wound in his side. Ramirez grabbed his arm, hauling him forward, but Sanchez shoved him off. I can move, he snapped, though his face was pale as ash. Don't waste your strength. Nobody argued. Arguments wasted time, and time was the one thing none of us had. We just kept moving, the crunch of sand under boots and the hum of engines above weaving into a rhythm that carried us step by step. Then the traces flashed again, streaking red across the horizon, followed by explosions so close the shockwave rippled across our backs. The enemy wasn't done. Trucks had pushed through from another flank, trying to cut us off, and Spectre was ripping them apart. For a moment the sky turned blood red, shells detonating in waves, and I almost felt sorry for the bastards running headlong into that storm. Almost. But even with the gunship covering us, the danger wasn't gone. A sharp whistle sliced through the night, followed by a flash of fire 100 meters away, the blast lifting sand into a plume that rained over us. Mortars. They were bracketing our movement, adjusting by the second. Someone out there had eyes on us, maybe with stolen drones or ground spotters. Keep spread out. I barked, waving my arm. Don't bunch up, keep moving. Another mortar screamed down, exploding closer, shards of steel whistling past our ears. We hit the sand, pressed flat, then pushed up and ran again. My chest burned, my legs were lead, but fear kept me moving. Above us, the AC-130 adjusted its circle, and the 25mm lit up again, a stream of angry red dots pouring across the horizon. A secondary explosion bloomed, and the mortars stopped. For now. The bird had found them, silenced them, but I knew more would come. These bastards were relentless. We crested a ridge, and below stretched another wide basin of sand, black and endless. Far to the southeast, faint lights flickered, maybe the glow of the LZ, maybe another mirage, but I clung to it. That's it, I said, pointing. That's where we're going. Nobody questioned it. They just adjusted their packs, tightened grips on rifles, and pushed harder. Hours felt like minutes, minutes like years. Sweat turned cold under body armor, sand caked our faces, and silence pressed in between the roars of the gunship. Then movement on the ridge to our right snapped the quiet. Shadows, dozens of them, sliding into firing positions. My stomach dropped. They were waiting for us. The first bursts of automatic fire raked the sand, traces slicing past us. We dove, returning fire in short bursts, our rounds sparking off rocks and cutting down the first few silhouettes. But there were too many, more than we could handle. The ambush had us pinned, and every second wasted meant more fighters closing from behind. Spectre, this is ground team. I shouted into the comms, voice ragged. Ambush on the ridge, danger close, we need immediate fire. The reply came quick, clipped. Copy, ground, mark your position. Ramirez cracked a chemical light, snapping it and tossing it onto the sand, the faint IR glow visible to the gunship overhead. Seconds later, the night exploded. The 40mm barked, shells arcing down in a deadly rhythm, tearing the ridge into fire and dust. Fighters were flung like ragdolls, their screams cut short by steel and flame. The 25mm swept across the slope, stitching death wherever it touched. We hugged the ground, the shockwaves rolling over us, sand pelting our helmets like rain. In less than a minute, the ridge was nothing but burning wreckage, the ambush erased as if it had never existed. We pushed forward again, hearts hammering, and I realized how close we'd come to being shredded. Without the gunship, that would have been it. No glory, no last stand. Just a massacre. Keep moving, I rasped, forcing the words out. Don't look back. The basin stretched on, every dune feeling like another mountain to climb. Sanchez was faltering badly now, each step slower, his breathing shallow. Ramirez slung his arm over his shoulders despite protests, dragging him forward. None of us would leave him behind, not after what we'd already survived. Not after the bird above had bought us this chance. Finally, the faint lights ahead grew brighter, no longer mirages but the glow of IR markers set by whoever had secured the LZ. Relief washed through me, but it was poisoned by the knowledge that the enemy would know this too. They'd be converging, desperate to cut us off before we could escape. And as if on cue, the ground trembled with the distant rumble of engines. More trucks, maybe armor, rolling hard toward our only lifeline. My radio crackled again. Ground team, Spectre. Exfil bird is inbound, 2 minutes out. Hold position and mark LZ. 2 minutes. It might as well have been 2 hours. The engines grew louder, headlights stabbing across the dunes, voices shouting in the night. They were throwing everything at us, their last chance to finish what they started. I planted myself in the sand, rifle braced, and looked at the men around me. Exhausted, bloody, faces smeared with dirt, eyes hollow but burning with defiance. This is it, I said. We hold until the bird lands. No one breaks. No one falls. Ramirez chambered a fresh round, Sanchez lifted his rifle with trembling hands, the others spread out in a half circle around the LZ. Above, the AC-130 adjusted its orbit, engines roaring like a storm building to its peak. The night was about to be carved in fire again, and if we were going to live, we'd have to match its fury with every bullet left in our mags. The desert went quiet, just for a heartbeat, as if the world itself was holding its breath. Then the horizon erupted with headlights and the sky turned red once more. The first wave came screaming over the dunes in a storm of engines and gunfire, technicals bouncing hard across the sand, headlights blazing like the eyes of charging beasts. They opened up with mounted guns, long arcs of traces slicing across the night, tearing into the dunes around us and kicking up fountains of sand. We were already firing back, each man picking targets, our rifles cracking sharp and fast, but our ammo was thinning, and every burst had to count. Ramirez dropped the gunner of the lead truck, his body flipping backward as the heavy weapon swung dead. Sanchez, pale as death but still fighting, stitched rounds across a cluster of silhouettes pouring from another vehicle, cutting 2 down before slumping back to reload with trembling hands. The rest of us spread fire wide, slowing them, but not stopping them. Then the sky roared again, and everything changed. The AC-130 began its run, its cannons thundering with a rhythm like the beating of a war drum. The 25mm spewed traces that carved glowing paths through the dark, chewing through trucks, ripping men from their feet, shredding weapons into twisted fragments. The 40mm barked, each round detonating with bone-shaking force, scattering fighters like leaves in a storm. Then came the 105mm, the sound so deep it rattled your bones, the impact a sunburst of fire that swallowed whole squads in a heartbeat. The desert lit up like day, painted red by explosions, the air filled with smoke, fire, and screams. The enemy's charge faltered, vehicles crashing into each other, fighters scattering in blind panic. But they didn't stop. More kept coming, a tidal wave of desperation, determined to cut us down before the exfil bird could touch dirt. "Spectre, this is ground," I shouted into the comms over the chaos. "We're danger close, repeat, danger close." "Copy ground, eyes on," came the calm voice overhead. "Stay marked, we'll clear your perimeter." Ramirez cracked another IR chemistry light and tossed it wide, marking our half-circle position, and the gunship adjusted instantly. Its cannons bent their fire outward, shredding the dunes just beyond our line, each blast shaking the ground beneath our bellies. Fighters tried to breach the perimeter, sprinting through the hellfire, but none made it more than a few steps before being erased in streaks of red or bursts of white flame. Then a new sound. Cut through the chaos, a low chop of rotor blades, faint but growing louder, the sweetest sound we'd heard in weeks. The exfil bird. A Chinook, heavy and slow, but built like a tank, thundering toward us across the desert night. Relief surged through my veins, but it was laced with dread. The enemy heard it too. Their gunfire shifted, traces arcing toward the sound, desperate to bring it down. Spectre roared louder, its cannons doubling their fury, hammering everything within a mile of the LZ. The ground shook, the sky bled fire, and still the fighters charged. The Chinook came in low, kicking up a storm of sand with its rotor wash, its rear ramp already lowering as it hovered just above the ground. "Move! Move!" I yelled, waving the team forward. We sprinted through the dust, bullets snapping past, explosions lighting the night. Ramirez hauled Sanchez over his shoulder, the wounded man still clinging to his rifle even as blood dripped down his arm. We ran like demons chased us, and in truth they did. Fighters poured from the dunes, spraying wildfire, their shouts drowned by the deafening roar of rotors and cannons. I felt rounds crack past my head, one grazing so close it ripped cloth from my sleeve. Then I was at the ramp, shoving the others inside, turning back to fire another burst at the shadows closing in. Ramirez stumbled up the ramp with Sanchez, then spun, his rifle barking until the bolt locked back empty. He tossed the useless weapon and dragged himself inside as the rest of us laid down our last rounds. "All aboard!" I shouted, climbing the ramp last, still firing until the very last second before yanking myself into the belly of the bird. The ramp slammed shut, the Chinook banked hard, and we were airborne, the desert below vanishing into smoke and fire. But it wasn't over yet. The enemy wasn't letting go so easily. Traces climbed into the sky, wild streams of red trying to claw us down. Then, with a bone-deep crack, a streak of fire launched upward, an RPG. It missed by meters, exploding harmlessly in the air, but the message was clear. They would throw everything to drag us back into the dirt. "Spectre, this is ground, we're aboard, we're airborne," I called into the comms, chest heaving. "Copy, ground," came the calm voice again. "We're staying on station until you're clear. Enjoy the show." And the show began. The AC-130 circled tighter around our ascending bird, unleashing everything it had left. The 25mm swept the dunes in long arcs, cutting down fighters who still clawed forward. The 40mm boomed in steady rhythm, each impact hurling men and vehicles into fire. And the 105mm, the king of cannons, spoke with finality, each blast silencing whole groups at once, painting the sand with pillars of flame. From the open side door of the Chinook, I looked back and saw the desert transformed. What had been a battlefield was now an inferno, the dunes glowing with fire, the refinery ruins still burning, the horizon painted blood red by the relentless hand of Spectre. The fighters broke at last, their will shattered, their bodies scattered. Those who survived ran into the night, abandoning weapons, abandoning their pride, fleeing from a sky that had turned against them. The gunship didn't chase. It circled one last time, laying down a final curtain of fire, then rose to higher altitude, its engines fading into the distance. The message was clear. The sky wasn't theirs. Not tonight. Inside the Chinook, we collapsed against the walls, too exhausted to speak, sweat and blood mixing with dust on our faces. Ramirez leaned back, clutching Sanchez, who was slipping in and out of consciousness. The others sat silent, staring blankly, their eyes reflecting the fire still burning below. I sat there too, rifle across my lap, heart pounding, ears ringing, mind racing. For weeks, we had been told the truth was final, that air power was gone, that the sky was lost. But tonight we had seen something else, proof that the sky still belonged to those willing to take it back, proof that when the angels of death return, they paint the night in fire and remind the world that no enemy owns the heavens. The Chinook roared into the darkness, carrying us toward safety, but I knew deep down this wasn't the end. It was only the beginning, and the fire we had seen tonight was just the first stroke of a storm that would decide who held the sky forever. The bird clawed higher into the night, banking hard as it left the burning basin behind. Inside, the cabin was lit only by the dim red glow of instruments, shadows cutting across faces drawn tight with exhaustion. The engines thundered like a heartbeat, steady and powerful, and for the first time in weeks I felt distance growing between us and the hell we had crawled through. The crew moved with brisk efficiency, strapping down gear, checking vitals, wrapping bandages tighter. Ramirez lay with his teeth gritted while a medic tied a tourniquet above his shredded leg. Sanchez was pale but alive, his thigh wound seeping dark through the dressings, and the rest of us leaned against the walls in silence, too drained even for words. I stared out the narrow window, the desert shrinking below, patches of fire still glowing like scars in the black. The AC-130 still circled in the distance, its silhouette etched against the stars, and a strange calm spread through me as I realized it was staying on station, covering us even as we flew away. For weeks we had been told the sky was lost, that the enemy's anti-air net had made it impossible to operate, and yet here was proof that someone, somewhere, had found a way to break through. The question burned in me as fiercely as the adrenaline still coursing in my veins. Why? Why us? Why now? The answer came soon enough. The pilot's voice broke over the intercom, steady, clipped, professional. Ground team, this is Valkyrie Actual. We're taking you to forward site Echo. Commands waiting. Forward site Echo. The name meant nothing, not to me, not to the others, but it carried weight in the way it was spoken. Not a regular FOB, not a place anyone admitted existed. A black site. That explained the silence, the abandonment, the weeks of static. We weren't just pawns in a forgotten mission, we had been part of something hidden, something command didn't want traced. Ramirez caught my eye from across the cabin, his face pale but his expression sharp. He mouthed the word without speaking. Why? I didn't know, but the weight of the intel in my pack pressed against my spine like lead. The maps, the weapons crates, the proof of coordination, they weren't just scraps of data. They were the kind of evidence that shifted wars. Maybe that's why they'd risked bringing the Spectre into contested skies, why they hadn't let us die in the sand like expendables. I leaned my head back against the bulkhead, the thrum of the rotors rattling through my skull, and closed my eyes for a moment. Flashes of fire painted the dark behind my eyelids, the red arcs of traces seared into memory. Every time the cannons had roared, death had come like judgment. We had lived under its shadow, but the enemy had been the ones condemned. The bird pitched, and when I opened my eyes again, the glow of distant lights shimmered on the horizon. Not city lights, these were buried deep, scattered low, shielded by terrain. Forward sight Echo. The base loomed out of the desert like a mirage made of steel and shadow. No runways, no visible towers, just a sprawl of camouflaged hangars and bunkers cut into the earth. Floodlights snapped on as we approached, beams crossing over the landing zone, and armed figures moved with precision, guiding us in. We touched down hard, the rotors kicking up waves of dust, the ramp dropping with a slam. The air that rushed in was heavy with oil, sweat, and the sharp bite of secrecy. As we staggered down, half limping, half carried, We were met by men in unmarked uniforms, rifles slung, eyes hidden behind night vision lenses. They said nothing, just guided us toward a blast door carved into the side of a low hill. The hum of generators vibrated through the ground, and as the door groaned open, cold recycled air spilled out, hitting us like a wall. Inside, the world changed. Fluorescent lights buzzed, polished concrete floors stretched in long corridors, and screens flickered on walls showing satellite feeds, drone imagery, coded streams of data. It was a nerve center buried under desert rock, invisible to the world above. We were ushered into a room lined with maps and monitors, and at the center stood a man in plain fatigues, silver hair cropped close, his face carved with lines of command. His eyes, sharp and gray, locked onto us the second we entered. "You made it," he said simply, his voice gravel but steady. No congratulations, no sympathy, just fact. We stood there, 7 shadows of men, grime and blood still clinging, and none of us had the strength to speak. He let the silence hang, then pointed to my pack. "You brought something." I pulled it off, the weight nearly dropping me, and set it on the table. The maps, the photos, the files, all of it spilled out, fanned under the harsh light. His eyes scanned quickly, his jaw tightening. "This confirms it," he muttered, half to himself. "They've moved beyond insurgency. This is a coordinated campaign." He lifted one photo, the crates of weapons with Cyrillic stenciling. "And they're not alone. Someone's backing them. Someone with reach." The room chilled. None of us spoke, but the truth pressed in heavy. If these enemies weren't acting alone, if they had state backing, then the war was about to stretch far beyond desert skirmishes. The gray-eyed man looked at us again, his stare cutting. "You weren't abandoned. You were bait. We needed confirmation, and they'd never reveal their hand unless they thought they could erase you. The AC-130 was a last card, one we couldn't afford to play until the board was set. But you survived. You brought this back. Now the game changes." The words hit like a punch. Bait. Used. Weeks of silence, of bleeding and crawling through hell, and it hadn't been oversight, it had been design. My fists clenched, but there was no anger left in me, only exhaustion layered with a bitter kind of understanding. The mission hadn't been about us. It had been about drawing the enemy out, proving their strength, revealing their allies. And we had delivered, at the edge of death, with the sky painted red above us. Ramirez spoke first, his voice low but steady despite the bandage on his leg. "So what now?" The man's gaze didn't waver. "Now we take the fight back to them. You'll rest, you'll recover, and then you'll move again. This war isn't over. It's just begun." Behind him, the monitors flickered with live feeds, convoys moving across borders, ships offloading in hidden ports, men training in camps under foreign flags. The world was shifting, alliances in shadow, enemies no longer just faceless fighters in the sand but nations hiding behind proxies. And somewhere in that storm, 7 men who had been written off as expendable were about to be thrown back into the fire. I sank into a chair, body trembling, mind racing. The AC-130 had saved us, had carved salvation into the sky with thunder and fire, but its arrival hadn't been a miracle. It had been a move in a game bigger than us, bigger than any of us could see. Air power wasn't gone. It had been withheld, saved, sharpened into a blade only drawn at the most critical moment. And we had been the test. As the medics moved through us again, stitching, wrapping, injecting, I stared at the maps on the wall, at the glowing arcs of red where enemy plans stretched across continents, and I knew the truth. The desert hadn't been the end of our mission. It had only been the beginning, and the sky was far from done painting itself red. The room buzzed with tension as we sat in silence, the hum of the generators beneath the floor filling every pause the gray-haired commander left hanging. His words still cut through me like a blade: bait, expendable, pawns in a war we hadn't even known the full shape of. But bitterness wasn't enough to outweigh survival, and survival meant adapting, moving, obeying, even when the truth burned. The commander leaned on the edge of the table, his eyes sweeping across us. "You've already seen what they are capable of. What you don't know is that they are preparing for something bigger. Your intel confirms they've secured a shipment corridor, one that runs straight through the desert you bled in. Weapons, munitions, vehicles, everything needed to escalate this war beyond borders." He tapped the map, his finger landing on a thin black line cutting through mountains and dunes. "We can't strike it with jets, not yet. Their anti-air network is strong, thicker than anything we've faced since the opening years. Satellites can't see it all. Drones get swatted down. But your evidence tells us one thing: they don't believe the AC-130 is in play. They've grown arrogant. That's where you come in. I felt the weight of his gaze land heavier than the desert sun. You're not done. In 48 hours, you'll redeploy with Spectre cover. Your job is to mark the corridor, plant beacons, and hold until the gunship arrives. Then we turn their lifeline into ashes. His words dropped like iron. 48 hours. After weeks of clawing through fire and blood, after losing men and nearly breaking, we were being asked to dive back into the jaws with nothing but a promise of cover. But this time it was different. This time we had seen the sky come alive, we had felt the thunder of the Spectre raining salvation. Maybe it was madness, maybe it was just hope wrapped in steel, but no one objected. Ramirez shifted, his bandaged legs stretched stiff before him. You're asking us to light up a convoy with half a team and wounded men. His voice wasn't refusal, just a statement of fact. The commander didn't flinch. You won't be alone. You'll have ground support, a small detachment already positioned. They'll secure exfil. Your only task is to get eyes on target, confirm movement, and mark. The Spectre will do the rest. A murmur went through us, quiet but sharp. It was suicide dressed as strategy, but none of us spoke against it. Deep down, we knew the truth. If those convoys made it through, everything we'd suffered would have been for nothing. Sanchez, pale but steady, leaned forward. And if their anti-air cracks the sky again? The commander met his gaze without a flicker. Then you improvise. That's what SEALs do. His words should have angered me, but instead I felt a strange calm settle in my chest. We'd already stared death in the face, already walked the edge and come back bleeding. This was just another turn of the knife. The debrief ended with clipped orders and no goodbyes. We were led to a lower bay, where gear was laid out on tables. Cleaned, replenished, waiting like silent sentinels. For the first time in weeks, I saw weapons gleaming instead of caked in sand, magazines full instead of scrounged, armor plates uncracked. My hands trembled as I slid fresh rounds into pouches, the metallic click echoing like a promise. We moved without speaking, the ritual of gearing up pulling us into rhythm. Medics hovered, adjusting bandages, injecting painkillers, strapping on braces where wounds had weakened us. No one asked if we were fit. Fit or not, we were going. When I slung my rifle across my chest, the weight was familiar, grounding, and I realized the exhaustion had dulled into something else, resolve sharpened by fire. That night, in the dim barracks carved into the rock, sleep didn't come. I lay on the cot staring at the ceiling, the low hum of ventilation masking the churn of thoughts. Images of the desert haunted me, the red sky, the roar of cannons, the faces of men we'd lost. But overlaying it all was a new vision, a convoy snaking through darkness, trucks heavy with weapons, and above it the silhouette of the AC-130, wings bristling with death, fire raining down until nothing remained. When dawn came, I rose without the heaviness I expected. The mission was clear, brutal in its simplicity. Mark, hold, survive. Everything else was noise. We lifted off under a fading moon, the desert stretching below like an endless ocean of sand and stone. This time, there was no fear of being abandoned. I knew the Spectre was real, knew it would come, and that belief burned away hesitation. We were delivered by nightfall to an outcropping of cliffs overlooking the corridor, a jagged spine of rock with caves hidden like open wounds in the stone. The ground detachment was already there, a squad of hardened operators with eyes sharp and faces set. They greeted us with nods, no handshakes, no words wasted. In war, recognition was enough. Together, we scouted the ground, laying out fields of fire, mapping sightlines, planting hidden beacons in positions that would catch the convoy when it came. Every step was methodical, every action rehearsed, because once the trucks rolled, there would be no second chances. Night wrapped us in silence. The stars hung cold above, indifferent, and the desert wind whispered across the rocks. We lay in wait, rifles cradled, scopes scanning, ears tuned for the first hint of engines. Time stretched, heavy, endless, but none of us shifted. Patience was our armor. Hours bled together until finally, in the dead stretch before dawn, the ground trembled faintly. I pressed my ear to the stone. It was no trick of the wind. Engines, heavy, dozens of them, grinding through the sand in slow, relentless rhythm. The convoy. My heart hammered once, then steadied. I raised my hand in signal, and the team came alive, silent, precise, eyes locking onto the dark ribbon of road below. Shadows emerged, long lines of trucks cloaked in tarps, armored vehicles bracketing them, headlights cut to slits, their presence a serpent crawling through the desert. I exhaled slow, steady, and thumbed the beacon switch. A faint red pulse blinked in the rocks, invisible to the eye beyond 100 yards but bright to the eyes circling high above. Somewhere, miles overhead, the AC-130 would be seeing it, adjusting, hunting. We waited, the air thick with the scent of dust and oil drifting up from the convoy. Then the first crack split the sky. Not thunder, not lightning, judgment. The AC-130 roared into range, its cannons vomiting fire, the night exploding red as tracer streams cut down like molten rain. Trucks shattered in flame, armored escorts split apart under the fury, the desert turning into a battlefield of fire and screams. The convoy convulsed in chaos, men scrambling, vehicles swerving, and through it all the Spectre painted death across the sand, relentless, unstoppable. We opened fire from above, rifles barking, cutting down those who tried to scatter. It was controlled fury, a storm unleashed, and for the first time I understood what power truly meant. Air power wasn't gone. It had just been waiting for the right moment to remind the world who owned the sky. The desert burned beneath us, waves of fire rolling out where the convoy had once been, the echoes of cannon fire still rattling in my chest. Smoke twisted into the night, thick and black, curling upward like signals to gods that no longer listened. The AC-130 still circled above, its engines a low growl, banking wide and slow, searching for anything that had survived. My rifle barrel smoked, the heat biting into my gloves, and the ringing in my ears muted the cries of the dying below. For a moment, just a breath of time, there was silence, the kind that follows judgment when the world holds still to weigh what has been done. Then the silence broke. A flash in the distance, a streak of light ripping across the horizon, and the sky cracked open with the roar of a missile launch. My gut clenched instantly, the enemy hadn't been caught flat-footed. They were waiting. Trails of fire shot upward, surface-to-air missiles tearing toward the gunship. The AC-130 banked hard, flares spitting from its sides like molten sparks, the night lighting up as the missiles curved, chasing heat. One exploded harmlessly, a sunburst in the black, but another streaked too close. The gunship shuddered, its belly glowing as shrapnel ripped across its frame, but still it flew, engines grinding with power that refused to die. Over the comms, the pilot's voice crackled, calm but edged with strain. Spectre is hit. We're still on station. Engaging secondary. And engage it did. Cannons roared again, heavier, slower, the deep thump of the howitzer shaking the cliffs. Enemy positions hidden beyond the convoy erupted, bunkers cracking, hidden emplacements blasted into ruin. That's when the truth landed like a stone in my chest. This wasn't just a convoy. It was bait, just like we had been weeks before. They wanted the gunship to show itself, to commit, to bleed. Ramirez's voice cut through the din, ragged but sharp. They knew. They damn well knew would bring it. He was right. The Spectre wasn't striking a supply run, it was tearing into the heart of a trap, and we were standing on its edge. More missiles launched, streaking in pairs, and though flares bloomed again, one clipped the wing. Fire trailed from the gunship as it staggered, its silhouette wavering, but still it circled, still it roared, defiant against the storm rising to swallow it. My throat tightened as I watched it fight, a single bird against a sky bristling with teeth. We scrambled in the rocks, shifting position, scanning the dark for more launch sites. Sanchez pointed, his hand steady despite his bandages, and we saw them, trucks with mounted launchers hidden in the dunes, crews scrambling to reload. Without hesitation, we opened fire. Our rifles spat red sparks, and the ground squad with us unleashed heavier rounds, cutting through men and machines alike. Explosions lit the sand as rockets cooked off, one launcher flipping skyward in a blaze of orange. Still, there were more. Always more. The commander's words came back to me, cold and heavy. This war isn't over. It's just begun. I understood now. This wasn't a border fight, wasn't insurgents scavenging scraps. This was organized, funded, supplied with weapons meant for armies, not raiders. And behind it all, the unseen hand of a state that wanted us buried here, stripped of air power, silenced forever. The AC-130 turned again, its guns barking with stubborn fury, painting the night in arcs of fire, cutting down what it could. Every strike shook the desert, every flash lit the rocks around us like a storm of lightning. But I could see it faltering, its movement slower, its engine strained. The thought of it falling here, of that great bird burning in the sand, clawed at me. It wasn't just a machine. It was hope forged into steel, the reminder that no matter how strong the enemy, the sky could still be ours. Ramirez dragged himself beside me, his leg bound stiff but his rifle steady. His eyes met mine, and in them I saw the reflection of the fires below, the understanding we shared without words. If the Spectre fell, The war would tilt in ways we couldn't recover. "We hold," I muttered, my voice rough but certain. "We hold until it's clear." And so we fought, not with dreams of survival but with the raw need to buy every second we could for the bird above us. Every round I fired was a prayer, every flash from my barrel a demand that the sky not give in. The ground trembled with the roar of its cannons, the very earth splitting as steel tore through steel, flesh, and fire. Minutes bled like hours, the battle stretching into a blur of smoke and thunder. At last, the missile fire slowed, the streaks in the sky dwindling, the enemy's launches silenced one by one under the wrath of the spectre and the teeth of our rifles. The desert stank of burning fuel, of scorched flesh, of war's aftermath. Silence returned, broken only by the labored growl of the gunship circling above, wounded but alive. Over the comms, the pilot's voice came again, hoarse but steady. "Target destroyed. Corridor neutralized. Spectre returning to base." A cheer didn't rise. There was no strength for it. Only relief, deep and silent, as if our very bones had been carrying the weight of the sky and could finally set it down. I slumped against the rock, my chest heaving, sweat and dust caked thick on my skin. Around me, the others did the same, rifles lowering, eyes staring out over the wreckage below. Dozens of vehicles lay shattered, fires consuming what had been a lifeline for our enemies. Men lay scattered like broken shadows, their screams fading into the crackle of flames. It was over, but victory tasted bitter. This hadn't been a triumph. It had been survival snatched from the jaws of a trap, and though we had won this field, I knew in my gut that the war was shifting. The enemy had shown their hand, and it was heavier than anything we had prepared for. As dawn bled over the horizon, painting the smoke in hues of gold and gray, I looked up at the battered silhouette of the AC-130 limping east. The Spectre had bled for us, had risked everything to keep us alive, and it had proven something no enemy could deny. Air power wasn't gone. It was wounded, scarred, but still burning, still able to paint the sky red when the moment demanded it. And yet, I couldn't shake the truth that pressed in on me with the weight of inevitability. If this was just a convoy, just bait, then the real storm hadn't even begun. Somewhere beyond these dunes, beyond this horizon, an enemy far larger, far stronger, was waiting. And when they moved, the fires of this night would look like sparks compared to the inferno to come. The desert quieted as the sun climbed, light spilling over wreckage that smoldered like the bones of giants. Every shadow stretched long, every gust of wind carried the stench of burned fuel and iron. We sat among the rocks, weapons slack in our hands, eyes bloodshot and hollow. No one spoke. Words would have been too small for the weight of the night we had endured. The Spectre had limped away eastward, a wounded predator refusing to fall, and its fading silhouette had left us with a strange emptiness. We were alive, yes, but alive didn't feel like victory. It felt like the pause between storms. Hours later, another bird came for us, not a Spectre this time but a low-flying transport, dark and unmarked, slipping across the horizon like a shadow afraid to be seen. We boarded in silence, every step heavy, and as the ramp closed the desert vanished behind steel walls. The engines roared, and once again we were carried away from death, not by triumph but by necessity. Inside, the air was thick with oil and exhaustion. Medics worked methodically, checking wounds, replacing bandages, injecting relief where bodies trembled. No one resisted, no one complained. We were beyond that. My eyes drifted shut more than once, but each time the images pulled me back, the fire in the night, the missiles streaking, the roar of cannons, the knowledge that we had walked through a trap and somehow crawled out again. When we touched down, it wasn't at the hidden bay we'd left but at a new location, deeper, darker, buried beneath layers of security that spoke of secrets stacked on secrets. Corridors wound like veins through reinforced concrete, guards flanking us at every turn. We were led into a chamber wider than any hangar, its walls lined with screens and maps that glowed with shifting arcs of red and blue. At the center, the gray-haired commander waited, his eyes sharp despite the fatigue etched into his face. He didn't waste time with greetings. "You've seen it now," he said, his voice low, hard. "You know what we're up against." That wasn't just a convoy, it was a probe. A demonstration of their reach. They wanted to see if we'd risk the sky again, and now they know we will. He pointed to the screens, where satellite feeds flickered with new movement, convoys massing at borders, ships unloading in hidden harbors, camps swelling with recruits. This is larger than insurgents. Larger than any cell we've fought before. These are state actors, hiding behind shadows, testing us. And last night was just their opening move. The words hung in the air like a verdict. Around me, the others shifted, weariness etched deep but focus sharpening. We had all suspected, but hearing it laid out stripped away the last of the illusions. This wasn't a war we could win with raids and skirmishes. This was something that would engulf nations. The commander's gaze fell on me, steady and unflinching. You carried the intel that exposed them. You marked the corridor that broke their supply line. You proved the Spectre can still own the night. You've done more than survive, you've changed the field. But the cost, his words trailed, his jaw tightening. The cost has only begun. Ramirez leaned on his crutch, his voice a rasp but clear. So we're not done. It wasn't a question. The commander shook his head. No. You'll rest, you'll heal, but you're not done. None of us are. The war ahead will demand more than we've ever given. He turned back to the screens, his silhouette dark against the glow. The enemy thinks air power is broken. They think they've closed the sky. But last night proved them wrong. The AC-130 is still a hammer, and you are the hand that guides it. Together, you'll remind the world who commands the night. The room felt colder, heavier, as the truth settled in. We weren't heroes. We weren't saviors. We were tools in a war stretching beyond deserts and borders, a war of shadows and steel. And yet, in that moment, I felt something stir beneath the exhaustion, a grim pride, a defiance born not from glory but from survival. We had been bait, but we had endured. We had been written off, but we had carved our names in fire across the sky. Later, in the barracks, as silence draped itself over us like a shroud, I lay awake staring at the dark ceiling, listening to the faint hum of air systems buried in the walls. My body ached, my wounds throbbed, but it wasn't pain that kept me from sleep. It was the knowledge that everything had changed. I thought of the Spectre, scarred and battered, refusing to fall. I thought of the enemies waiting, gathering strength, believing they had bled us dry. And I thought of the moment the cannons roared, when the sky burned red and the ground shook with a power that no enemy could match. That was the truth of war. Not the lies whispered in briefings, not the politics traded in quiet rooms, but the fire, the steel, the defiance carved into the night by men who refused to yield. Air power wasn't gone. It was scarred, yes, and blooded, but it was alive, and as long as men like us were willing to drag ourselves through the fire to guide it, it would never die. When dawn came again, spilling pale light across concrete walls, I rose with the others. No one spoke. No one needed to. The war was waiting, vast and merciless, and we would walk back into it not because we sought glory but because survival demanded it. We were seals, forged in the dark, tempered by fire, and bound to the fight whether we chose it or not. Somewhere beyond these walls, the enemy gathered, bold in their belief that the sky no longer belonged to us. But they hadn't seen what we had seen. They hadn't stood beneath the wings of the Spectre when it painted the world in red fire. They hadn't felt the earth quake with its judgment. And they hadn't learned what we already knew, that no matter how deep the night, no matter how heavy the trap, there would always come a moment when the sky roared back, defiant, unbroken. The AC-130 had bled, but it had not fallen. Neither had we. And as long as both still drew breath, the war was far from theirs to claim. The end.